How do you think that this overall just changes the game and how it's going to be officiated? Again, do you just think it's a crew by crew thing, or do you think that this is a little bit more uniformed into how we're going to see the NFL be called?
I think what the cause and effect of any implementation of replay is that officials are going to let plays go that are reviewable. At least they should. That's typically what they're being coached to do, or the mechanics of the officiating. Now, Dean Blandino and Mike Pereira might disagree with what I'm saying this, but I've watched enough football to see that at times they will let plays play out because they know they can rely on replay to help bail them out in that scenario. You see it in college football. You'll see it from time to time in the NFL. It's one of the reasons why, again, I think I'd like to see more jurisdiction under the replay assistant to be a part of that process, because then at least we know every single officiating crew can rely on that, and they're probably going to see it very similar, knowing they can rely on replay to be able to fix it. Now, the question becomes, how do we expedite or make more efficient the replay process? Again, I keep going back to college football because they've been able to have a little more practice with this, having a replay assistant at each game, being able to comb through a bunch of plays, scoring plays, turnovers, targeting. Maybe targeting is not the best example of that, but it's a slow down process because you might be ejecting a player sometimes, but they still, in large part, do a very quick job or fast job of making a decision on whatever that play was based on the call on the field. The NFL could implement something very similar. I don't know that it's really going to change the pace of the game a whole lot, but I think how they implement it would be one in which they kind of teach the officials, we understand we still give you a ton of power and control on the field, but that replay assistant is there for you. Utilize them in instances where it does feel a little bit gray out there.
So much for the NFL talking about not extending the game, right, Brady? Because, with this extra challenge, which, again, I agree with, because if you get 1 out of 2 right, I feel like you should be allotted an extra one, just because of the hit rate. It's so subjective on whether a ref will overturn a call or not, right? And that's the issue with challenges. When some of those calls are subjective, like, it just depends on what the ref thinks it is, or even the people that they're talking to in the replay booth. It's not to the letter of the law or black and white. So I think they should get an extra one. But I remember the NFL talking about not wanting to slow the game down, but yet here we are. I think it's always more important to get it right than worry about the actual length of the game.
Yeah, no, and we're going to talk about, kind of the length of game and the NFL not wanting to extend it in a little bit, but I do think we should probably focus more on pace than we would length of games. You were talking about it, Brady, like, as long as you can have expedited review processes, I don't really have a huge problem with them going to the booth. But if we get to these scenarios where we're kind of all sitting around and wondering, okay, what's taking so long? I don't know if a shot clock or anything like that for an official makes sense, but you know what I mean? Whatever moves the game along quickly, I think is the best thing going forward.
Yeah, I don't know if you want a shot clock on some of these guys. They might feel a little bit too much pressure to make a call in that amount of time, just freak out. The other thing is, as far as the mechanics behind the process, just so people know at home, when you're a part of a TV crew, the officiating crew is using your array of cameras to then figure out the best angle to review something, to sometimes piece together the right call, or try to see if they can overturn a call, or maybe there's something there, right, if it's challenged. So that's the other hard part about it, is it's not always on the officials as part of this review process. Sometimes it's on the TV networks. Sometimes it's on the truck. Sometimes it's on technology to be able to find the angle that they're looking for, run it back. Let's go back and see it. Sometimes these TV trucks are kind of old, not to put anyone on blast, all right? But the reality is sometimes the technology doesn't work as fast as we're accustomed to at home. So that becomes part of the issue with expediting that review process sometimes, to make sure we're not waiting. It's really not the official's fault at times. It's just a matter of technology, and we're just not quite there in regards to all the technology behind the scenes with a lot of the networks.
Yeah, and again, we're talking about, one of the new rule changes that we've seen is that the NFL, this was proposed by Dan Campbell and the Detroit Lions, that, typically you had to get both challenges correct for you to be rewarded the third. Now you only just need one. And I do think that is an important rule change, dudes, right?
Yeah, I do, just because, like what I was saying, and Brady, explained it really well as far as the different camera angles everybody has. But at the end of the day, it's still subjective to what that person that the ref is talking to calls, right? So, like, if you get 1 out of 2 right, I think you deserve an extra challenge, just because half of America will look at the play and be like, well, it definitely was, when they were challenging pass interference, they'll say it was pass interference. The other half will say it wasn't pass interference. So, like, my thing is if you get one out of the two right, like it's hard to get 2 out of 2 right, especially when it's not in your hands. It's up to somebody else to make that decision. So I love that Dan Campbell decided to bring this to the forefront in the Detroit Lions, because I think you do deserve an extra challenge if you get 1 out of 2 right. Because again, the hit rate in regards, like there will be times, I'm sure Brady, you can speak to this too, where you see a call on the field, and when you look at the challenge, like, oh, they're definitely overturning that, and it doesn't get overturned. So like my thing is, if a coach does get it right and they do overturn it, then yes, they deserve another challenge.
Yeah, there's no disagreement with that. I think if you're looking at the ability to get a challenge right, oftentimes, they should be awarded just if they get one right to get the third one. And then how it plays a factor in the second half of a game plays into the gamesmanship, the schematics of when you challenge the first time, how you go about challenging which plays and all that. So I've no qualms with this. Again, I'm the type that I don't think coaches are going to use challenges all the time. If we gave them an unlimited source of challenges, I don't think any head coach, any coordinator wants to be challenging every single play that's constantly out there. So if there's a concern about the pace of play from that standpoint, I don't see it happening quite as much. So again, not as big of a deal for me. I think the NFL replay assistant and it being able to correct some of the intentional grounding, roughing the passer penalties, that's a much bigger deal. I don't think it's getting as applauded as much amongst the masses in the media for the NFL kind of slowly going in that direction of making a pretty monumental change in my estimation of how things are going to be officiated moving forward.
Also with the play clock too, as well, right?
Yeah, that's part of it.
You'll see a lot. I felt like that was a lot more of the conversation last year too. I felt like there were a number of scenarios where the play clock was, at 0, then it's a little bit longer, and then all of a sudden the snap gets off, and there's a monumental play. I mean, you could end up seeing things erased too. Like, go back to that Bills-Chiefs game where Kadarius Toney was lined up off sides. Like, it's not a perfect example, but you have this monumental play. Things logistically weren't right pre-snap, and things go awry from there. So I do think that, like you're saying, Brady, I do think that this is one of those things that not a lot of people are talking about, but could have huge impacts on specific big plays in the league.
And to your point about the play clock, really when it gets down close to 0, if you talk to any edge rusher, a lot of times if they're aware of the play clock going down, or if they have a blitz on, they're going to be, licking their chops, watching that, kind of paying attention to then break on it, because they know once that thing hits 0, the snap has to come. So they know they can get a nice jump on the ball if the offense waits that long. So that's kind of one of the things that, you typically has played to the offensive advantage if they get a little extra time to get a play off, because now those guys might be second guessing that jump where they do have to start paying attention to the ball as opposed to paying attention to that play clock. But that's been something that you see once it gets to 5 and that defense is kind of walking around, getting ready to try to pressure a blitz. As a quarterback, eventually they're going to present themselves. And so you can hold it as long as you want, but once it gets close to 0, you got to snap the football too. So you can only do so much to help out your offensive line discern who's blitzing, who's not, who might be dropping and showing their hand before the snap of the football. So it definitely helps to a degree. I'll be curious too to see how offenses obviously adjust to that with the change in the rule.